We'll start with Dr. Mrinal Gounder and continuing our presentations. Dr. Gounder has made so much of all this progress possible, from the sorafenib trial through the nirogacestat phase 3, working on the Iowa trial, and he's going to be speaking about that today. And he's also the scientific director for DTRF and really supports everything we do. So, Dr. Gounder, we're looking forward to hearing you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Gabe, what a beautiful and inspiring speech that just comes from your heart. You know, this is truly inspiring, not just for patients with desmoid tumors, but really all people, you know, suffering from cancers and non-cancers and diseases. You know, I think this is a wake-up call for the mental health issues that as healthcare and, you know, as a nation, we really don't talk about at all, and yet it continues to take a huge toll on every family. So I hope, you know, the words that you've said will be in, you know, the interest of service, that will ultimately, you know, speak to millions of people around the world, and they will reach out to their doctors and their communities to seek the help. So thank you for being so brave and so vulnerable to share this in front of strangers. Okay, so I'm going to discuss a clinical trial that is ongoing. There's a lot of slides here, but I want to just take like 60 seconds to tell you what are like the key things to remember here, and then we'll delve into the details with each of the slides. The first thing to know is that this is an ongoing clinical trial. It's a phase 2 and a phase 3 clinical trial. The phase 2 portion is finished. This drug, name of this compound is AL102. The class of this compound, of this drug, is known as a gamma secretase inhibitor. It is the same type of class of drug as a nirogacestat that you heard about earlier. So in many ways, this drug or this class of drug has already shown benefit in desmoid tumor patients. We already have a general sense of what are the side effects with this class of drug, okay? So what I'm going to be telling you is first the phase 2 results, which means that about 42 patients were enrolled into the first portion of this study, and that is complete. And the purpose of that first portion was really to figure out what is the right dose and what's the best way to give it. Should we give it every day? Should we give it intermittently? That was the purpose of that. In addition, you know, there's a lot of, you know, it was also a way to find out, is the drug active or not? What are the side effects? All those things were to learn. That portion is complete. You cannot participate in that. Because of the positive results or the intriguing positive results seen there, the company Ayala has now opened up the study as a phase 3 study. The phase 3 study is essentially drug versus placebo. In order to enter this phase 3 study, one of the key requirements is that the tumor should have grown by 20% in the last 12 months, okay? And one of the exclusion is that you cannot have been previously treated with nirogacestat or some other gamma secretase inhibitor. And it's randomized and blinded, which means patients do not know which arm the computer put them in. Doctors don't know, even pharmacists don't know. Everybody carries on. You get scans every 3 months or so. And if the first scan, whenever that time may be, shows that the tumor has grown by 20%, there is a stoppage. You get unblinded and you find out, you know, are you on the placebo arm or are you on the treatment arm? If you're on the treatment arm, you know, you really come off at that time. If you're in the placebo arm, you have an option to cross over and get the drug. So this is sort of like the 30,000-foot view, or like the key takeaways from here. And what I'm going to do next is basically just show you the data and you know, through each of these slides. So the first slide essentially, oh, I missed it. It's fine. The bottom line is that it's a gamma secretase inhibitor. It works exactly the same way as the other gamma secretase inhibitors we've had in the past. The takeaway message here is that this drug, AL102, is tolerable. It has a side effect profile that is well tolerable and similar to the gamma secretase inhibitor from nirogacestat and many other gamma secretase inhibitors we've developed in the past. And in this phase 2 study, we've seen that there is decrease in the tumor dimension as well as the inner portion of it. What does this look like, the cellularity? And I'm going to show you some images related to that. So as I mentioned, the phase 2 is the first portion. That portion did not have any placebo. Whoever enrolled it, they got the drug. But they were randomized in 3 different ways. You either could get the drug at 1.2 milligrams every day, or 4 milligrams twice a week, or 2 milligrams twice a week. And that was also randomized. You could not pick. You just got assigned to one of the 3 things. And that got complete, and now we are in the phase 3, and this is a global study, open in Europe, in the United States. If it's available in a site close to you, please do ask the physicians there. So the phase 2, as I mentioned before, 3 different doses, and one was either every day or the other one what's known as intermittent. And I've already mentioned sort of the criteria for getting into that study. You had to be greater than 18 years of age, and you could have failed multiple prior lines of therapies, or you could be brand new diagnosed. But again, the key thing is that your tumor must have grown by 20% in the last 12 months in order to qualify. Okay, so here are some of the results. So all the patients who entered the study they met these criteria. They did have tumor progression when they entered. Half of the patients had prior surgeries. So 50% of patients who entered this previously had failed a surgery. 2/3 of patients had some kind of a drug, whether it's any number of drugs, chemotherapy, the tyrosine kinase inhibitors, or something else. And 1/3, their first drug that they received was this AL102. The average age of the patients on the phase 2, these are just the 42 patients, was 38.5 years. 74% were female, and the majority of the tumors were in the extra-abdominal, in the head and neck, limbs, back, and abdominal wall. So nice distribution of tumors throughout the body. How well did these tumors respond to this drug, AL102? And what you're seeing here are 3 different columns. Column 1 in blue is when the drug is given every single day at 1.2 milligrams, and 12 people were randomized into that arm. 13 people went into the 4 milligrams twice weekly. We just took the drug twice a week, but at 4 milligrams. Then twice weekly, another 11 patients got it at 2 milligrams. So those are the 3 different columns there. And if you look at the very top one, it says objective response rate, which means when a radiologist is looking at it, they're saying how much did the tumor shrink. And CR and PR is a definition defined by radiologists. CR means complete response, where there's no evidence of any tumor left, everything's gone. PR means partial response, which means the tumor has shrunk by 30% or more. In other words, if some tumor has shrank by 28% or by 29%, it's called stable disease. So it has to meet that 30% criteria. It could be 50%, 70%, 80%, 99%, it's a partial response. So if you look by that, 50% of those patients had a tumor shrinkage. 23% of those in the intermittent dosing, these are 3 out of 13 patients, had tumor shrinkage that met that criteria of CR or PR. And then 11 participants, or 45.5, had tumor shrinkage as well. Okay, and how long did it take for these tumors to meet this criteria? And that's the very bottom where it says time to objective response. Median is presented in months. So in the first group, patients who took the drug every day, their tumors, of the ones that reached this criteria of 30% or more, it happened in 6.7 months. And there's a range right there. It says 3.8 to 9.4. Means somebody responded as soon as nearly 4 months, as quickly as 4 months, their tumor shrank. And for someone else, it took about 9 months to get this, this more than 30% tumor shrinkage. But if you took the drug intermittently, it appears, and you can't really compare these numbers directly to each other, but it suggests or appears that it takes a little longer, 9.8 months compared to 6.7. And if you took it intermittently, 9.2 months compared to 6.7 months. That's the takeaway from this slide. This is the same thing. It's the same information. It's just presented as a graph. The blue part is the daily dosing. And again, what you're essentially seeing is that bar is essentially shows that the patients who are responding, who are getting this tumor shrinkage of 30% or more. You see that bar is a little bit more closer, the 6.7 months. And if you took it intermittently, it's later on. What's more interesting is, generally all of us, when we talk about tumor shrinkage, we only talk about how the tumor has shrank. But that's not the whole story. It's not just how much the tumor shrinks, but there is something very subtle that radiologists and doctors are trying to understand. And what happens is that some of these tumors don't necessarily shrink, or they may just shrink a little bit, right? Just 10% shrinkage, it's not that impressive. But when you look at it carefully using an MRI scan, what you notice is that this tumor that sometimes looks like the full moon essentially looks like it's a no moon night at all. So it's like the difference between a bright, bulb versus something that has been turned off. And what we think is that the drug is basically killing this tumor or modifying it in such a way that it's now just become like this big ball of collagen that it's inactive. So even though we say that it's stable disease, nothing has changed, that's not actually true. We're actually seeing that there is something that is changing inside it, even though we can't put a tick box and say, that tumor is now getting better, right? So, and that's called this thing called T2W signal intensity. And what you're seeing is that these tumors are really like 82% of these are like just sort of, there's a depth, there's a pretty significant shrinkage. I wouldn't say 82% shrinking, but rather that the intensity of that change is quite impressive. And same thing with the tumor volume as well. So when we say tumors are shrinking, radiologists just pick the widest range. They look at the diameter and they say it's 10 centimeters, it's now 5 centimeters, it shrank by 50%. But that's not the whole story. If you look at it very carefully, it's like a balloon. The whole balloon gets significantly smaller. And that's what volume means. And it's showing that this drug is also decreasing. And again, when you look at the blue, you see that if you take the drug every day, that these both volume, signal, as well as this tumor dimensions are all getting better in the right direction. And here's an example. If you look at the very top, it says baseline. And there's this big red line out there. And what you're seeing there, I want you to appreciate it, right? So there are some areas that are really bright, and those are all active desmoid tumor. And within that, nearby, you'll see a small area that looks a little darker. And this is the same thing, like if you looked at the moon on a full moon night, you will see it bright, and then there will be these craters that you're seeing. And what we think is happening under the microscope, if you were to put a needle there, is that these bright red spots are active desmoid tumors that have the potential to grow. And the dark ones are the ones that are kind of dying or on the way out. And on week 28, you can see this. I don't even have to show you this. This is so, just straight to see. Is that from dark, from light, it just becomes dark, suggesting that these tumors are responding, even though when you look at the dimension itself, it looks like it hasn't changed a whole lot, right? So you would say, oh, this tumor just had stable disease. It didn't change much, but that's not true. You can see that there is a subtlety that's happening there. And another tumor, great example there, right? And that one right below it, you see this nice big bright tumor. And if you just measure the dimension, it doesn't look like it has changed that much. But all of us can hear, can see the dramatic changes that are happening from this cellular to a collagenous mass. What about the side effects? As I mentioned before, a lot of these side effects are very similar to this class of drugs. And these are the side effects: diarrhea, nausea, fatigue, some alopecia, and dry skin. There was no major serious side effects for which patients, because of this drug needed to be, there was serious complications. Most of these side effects were manageable, but 21% of patients discontinued due to some of these side effects. And the ovarian dysfunction, which is something that's been talked about With the DeFi study, here it's reported to be 33% of women of childbearing potential. And most of the other adverse events are similar to the other gamma secretase inhibitors we've been developing for many years now. So this is just a summary, and I'm going to jump to the next slide talking about this phase 3 study. So the phase 2 is done, it's closed. The phase 3, as I mentioned before, is randomized. It's randomized by a computer, and patients can either go into the placebo arm or the drug at daily dosing. So the big lesson that came out of phase 2 is that the intermittent dosing that you take twice a week is not the best. Maybe to give it every day is much more impressive because tumors shrink faster as well. And again, as I mentioned before, nobody knows which arm you're on, but if the tumor shows on study that this has grown by 20%, then you get unblinded and you say, okay, 20%, let's see, was this person on the drug or the placebo? If they happen to be on placebo, get an option to cross over and get the drug on study. I think we discussed that. So what is different between the phase 2, which is closed, versus phase 3, is that you can be even as old as 12 years of age or older to be eligible for the study. But you still do need for the tumor to grow by 20% to get on this study. Okay, and I think we covered all of this. So how does this phase 3 look like? You start the study, you get your medical exam, your physical examination, you get an MRI scan. An MRI is required as part of the study, some blood tests. And then every month, you go back to your doctor, you get some blood tests, urine tests, and most importantly, you have to fill out these questionnaires. And this questionnaire is one of the questionnaires, is actually one that's developed by the Desmoid Tumor Research Foundation. It's a Desmoid specific questionnaire that was developed using some of the FDA guidance. And this is a questionnaire that you take on your free time, and it tells you, how did I feel today? Did I sleep well? What was the extent of my pain? What is my range of motion? All of these things. And this is also captured on the back end. And every 3 months, everybody gets an MRI scan to look at what's happening with these tumors. And as I mentioned before, it's open in the United States. It's opening in many, many places in Europe, and a couple of other locations, Australia, it looks like, and clinicaltrials.gov, or you can reach out to folks at Ayala Therapeutics to find out if it's a study that's open close to where you are. So, and then the clinical trial identifier number is NCT. So in order to get there, you can go to clinicaltrials.gov, and then you can put this name of this drug or this clinical trial number, and it'll tell you which are the sites that are open. And you can find out if there is a site that's close to you. And of course, you should share this information to other patients who are not attending here and tell them that there is an active study going on. I think that's it. Thank you.
We know that for the sake of the study, the exposure to previous gamma secretase inhibitors is an exclusion criterion. But do you believe there are reasons, you know whether there are reasons to believe there is any cross resistance between the different gamma secretase inhibitors?
I don't think so. I doubt it. Yeah. I mean, the short answer is I don't think we've ever studied it, right? We've never put a patient who's failed on a gamma secretase on a new one. But I'd be really surprised if there was some new mutation or something that came on and then a new drug. I mean, of course, from a pharmacokinetic perspective, it's possible that one drug didn't work because maybe the PK was not right for that patient. So from a pharmacokinetics perspective, sure, but I'm not sure these drugs are
This does not happen with other class of drugs, for example, with AGI inhibitors, don't have cross resistance.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's my opinion, but I don't think we've seen any data to support that.
You said that the Niro, he was on Niro as a pediatrics. Is that still, is it still would not disqualify him?
Disqualified, yes. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yes, of course.